So we're continuing our conversation about the afterlife. This is our deep dive into the afterlife. Now, we're kind of going along this trajectory and trying to really understand what happens. But in order to understand what happens after, we have to understand what happens here and now. What's going on here? So what I want to talk about today is the sanctification of time. Because one of the things that differentiates us, meaning those of us who are living within this world of falsehood that we call it, is time and space. Because the soul, after it leaves this world, is not confined by time and space the way it is while it's in this world. So in order to start understanding the soul after it leaves this world, we have to first understand the soul while it's in this world. And if we want to understand the soul while it's in this world, we have to understand the soul in relationship to time and space. So inherently, by its very nature, the discussion of the afterlife is very difficult. And we've discovered this over the course of the classes and the conversations that we've had. And other than the obstacle of trying to give language, which we've spoken about as well, or describe the ineffable, the trouble with engaging our minds and our thoughts with thoughts of the quote unquote afterlife is that it may cause the mind to forget the primacy of life in the present. So maybe this is the reason that the Torah doesn't often deal with this. And we don't see this so overtly described, because you would think that if it's so important the way we describe it, that there should be a lot more discussion around it. And we all know that even the discussion that we're having here today and this deep dive that we've been going through over the past few weeks and will be going through over the past few months is a unique discussion. It's not something that's generally done. The main reason is because being in this world, living in this world, is about living in this world. Alana, you had a question? Okay. So living in this world is about living in this world and not focusing on another world. So scattered throughout the entire body of the Torah and the Torah's wisdom, you can start looking through, and this is something that I've been working on, is you can start researching and seeing where does the Torah talk about the afterlife. And I think through that, we can construct, I'm not going to say it's a full picture, but you could get a good picture of what's really going on when it comes to the afterlife, which is exactly the purpose of our classes. So in general, the kind of information that when it discusses the afterlife in the Torah, it's more cryptic, it's more obscure than evident. And the ambiguous tone of much of the Torah's material on the afterlife, I think, continues to teach us that the fundamental point of living in this world is to live in this world. And the Torah is for this world and not the next world. The Torah is here to teach us how to live the best we can in this world. And the goal is to achieve connection, intention, and inspiration in this moment and not be fixated in some far off future or a remote past. Now, I'll give you an example. The very first mitzvah that we were given in the Torah at the time of the Exodus, the common misconception is that the first mitzvah that was heard was the first of the 10 commandments, but actually it's not true. The first directive that was given to the children of Israel as they were about to be liberated physically, mentally, and spiritually is that they should make a Jewish calendar, that they should count and sanctify time. This is right in the beginning of Nisan, right? It's actually perfect opportunity to have this discussion because it was right now on the calendar, right? Today, we're right in the beginning of Nisan. On our way, we're on our way to the freedom that we're going to celebrate in just over a week with the Passover experience that we relive and we retell as if it happened to us. So the first mitzvah that was given, as it says in the book of Exodus, chapter 12, verse 2, is that this month shall be for you the beginning of the months, referring to the month of Nisan, which is the month that we're in. So what God was saying to the Jewish people with the first commandment, even before the 10 commandments, even before leaving Egypt, they're not even freed yet. The first thing is witness the rebirth of the moon and consecrate that time as Rosh Chodesh, which means the new month. Count the months, calculate time, and establish the first day of each month as a significant and noteworthy occasion. And it is, till this day, a celebration. The first of each of the Jewish months is a celebration. Though, scientifically speaking, it's been proven that time and space are not absolutes, which means, according to science, there's no definite space or continuous flow of time. Still, in the Newtonian universe, in which I guess we could say that we functionally reside, time and space appear as fundamentals. What defines properties within a four-dimensional universe is that they're located within a certain region of three-dimensional space. For example, left and right, front and back, up and down, this is three-dimensional space. And at the same time, they're also positioned within a particular wavelength of time. So life as we know it exists in a spatial and temporal state. And this is precisely the first liberating concept that the children of Israel, that the Jews needed to know on their journey towards freedom. Autonomy and ultimate responsibility. That it is the utmost importance to sanctify time. Think about that for a moment. That the first thing that God wants to tell this nation that's not even quite free yet, the Jewish people, this is pre-Exodus, this is pre-leaving Egypt, this is pre the giving of a Torah, this is pre most of Jewish history. Sanctify time. Sanctify time. A number of years ago, for a short period, our community had taken over a church. And before the church was given over to us, the priest had to do a desanctification ceremony because they consider it a sanctified space. And they have to do a desanctification to desanctify the space. And so the priest asked me, now that we desanctified our space, what are you going to do to sanctify your space? And I said, Jews, we don't sanctify space. We sanctify time. That is a huge difference between the way we look at the world, which means I don't know if you're ever going to be in an airport on a random Sunday morning and see a group of Christians having prayer services at the corner of the airport. But I guarantee you, on any given day in the morning, if you end up in JFK or in O'Hare or one of these airports where a lot of religious Jews seem to go through, you will probably find a corner of the airport somewhere where there's going to be a minyan of Jewish men that are going to be praying, because for us, it doesn't matter where we pray. What matters is when we pray. And Alexandra says, Jerusalem, the Kotel, it's wonderful. That's true. We go to the Kotel. By the way, the Kotel has no spiritual significance on its own. It just happened to be that it's the closest place that we as Jews can get to today to where the temple was. The temple is a whole different conversation on its own about why we needed it. Originally, there was no temple. This time, when we're talking about the idea of sanctifying space, the first mitzvah, there was no idea of a temple. The temple was just a result of the golden calf, and then Moses, or God especially, realized the Jewish people needed a physical presence of spirituality in this world, that was not a golden calf. That was the onset of a temple. But really, the idea within Judaism is the sanctification of space, of sanctification of time, not the sanctification of space. I'm just going to finish this idea, and then I'll take your questions. Just give me a moment. So this idea of sanctifying time is the very act that allows us to celebrate the holidays, that celebrates Shabbat, which means the Passover is going to come on the 15th of the month of Nisan. It's a sanctification of time. Shabbat is going to come every Friday night as a sanctification of time. It's also necessary to sanctify space in order to have three-dimensional objects. So there's the spatial elements, which means, let's say, if someone is going to use the candlestick and put the candle in order to light the candles for Shabbat, that is a sanctification of a spatial element. So there is a sanctification of space, but it's not the primary component. Now, this paradigm stands in stark contrast to the masters of the Egyptians. The Egyptians were a death and afterlife obsessed civilization. The Egyptians spent much of their energy in preparations for and an anticipation of the hereafter. We know this about ancient Egypt. Think about the mummies, the mummification. Think about all of the pyramids and structures and things that they did. They sanctified death. They sanctified the afterlife. So it's unbelievable that the first mitzvah the Jews were given was to sanctify time in this world, because it was in stark contrast to the world they had been in. They had been in a world that reveled in death. People talked about death. What kind of mausoleum are you going to make? What kind of mummification are you going to have? That was the conversation on the street in Egypt. And this is what the Jewish people had been so engrossed with. We know that they became very much assimilated, as Jews often become assimilated into their surroundings. We're very good at that. The Jewish people in Egypt had become assimilated in their surroundings. And just not to go too much into Passover today, but one of the questions, if you listen to my daily thoughts, my question yesterday was, why did they have to run from matzah? I mean, why couldn't they make bread? And why did they have to run away so quickly? It takes 18 minutes. They didn't have an extra few minutes to make a proper sandwich. They had to only make matzah. And the answer is because they weren't running away the way we think of it. They were running away from themselves. Had they stayed in Egypt one moment longer, they would never have been redeemed. 80% of the Jews in Egypt didn't leave because they didn't want to leave, because they'd become so assimilated into Egyptian culture. So what's fascinating, if you think about these people, 80%, so all the people who are given this mitzvah, there's only 20% of the Jews left. And these people are still pretty much assimilated and so engrossed in Egyptian culture. And God says the first mitzvah, do exactly the opposite of the Egyptians. They sanctify death and afterlife. You sanctify time and life. And that's why you're going to see as a common theme throughout the Torah that it's time that we sanctify and it's life that we sanctify, right? You can break any mitzvah in order to save a life, because life in this world, while we're in this world, is the most important, which is in stark contrast to the way the Egyptians viewed life. And just to finish this thought, that ultimate freedom is gained by achieving mastery over all the elements of creation, time included. So as such, spiritual life and growth is never about detachment and always about involvement and transformation. We want to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be in this world during our lifetime. We'll do everything. That's why we focus on education so much. That's why we focus on making this world a better place, because it's really about being the best version of ourselves that we can be in this world. And with full mastery of our world, of this world, comes the power to hallow the seemingly mundane and transform the ordinary passage of time into a sacred rhythm, into a sacred song, and into a sacred celebration. Cheryl, what's your question?
You answered part of it, and yet I wasn't real sure. Was the reason, my question was, is the reason to sanctify time and space in this world or in this life, because there is no time and space in the afterlife. So God wanted us to appreciate the difference or the contrast, but you made it sound like it was in the paradigm of Egyptians, not to the afterlife. So that's where I got a little confused.
So I'll tell you that you're right on both sides. That you're right that it was about sanctifying time in this world because it's contrast to the next world. But also you're right, because if you think about it in the context of history, the Egyptians reveled in death. And by the way, if you think about other faiths, I'm not here to do a comparative religion study, but if you look at other faiths, there are other faiths that revel in death as well. And so this needed and continues to need to be a stark contrast to other faiths, to other societies, and especially to various societies that we found ourselves in over time that reveled in death. And so even though we're having
So
this,
isn't it?
yeah.
Isn't it also like martyrdom in some religions where they'll take their own life to be heroes?
Exactly.
That life is not important enough, that they will take their own and others. Okay.
Exactly. And now you understand why we despise all of that so much. I mean, obviously any normal person would, but, and
Yeah.
then again, we have been forced to another form of martyrdom, not the form of martyrdom that we're talking about. But we've been exposed and forced throughout time into various forms of martyrdom because we lived in societies of which, as we know, the 3 mitzvot that we have to give up our life for, only 3 of the 613, which is adultery, idolatry, and murder. And so, again, that's a whole different conversation all on its own, but it's something to be noted in your question. Hilton.
Yeah, I was going to tell you sort of a story similar to what you were saying about, converting a church into a shul. And, we had a story about that in, here in South Africa. And, the rabbi's answer was, that there's no, special ceremony you just have to do. But, just by bringing, a minyan together is, creates a sacred space. And yeah, so I mean, just that's it. That we just, the mere act of getting Jews together, no matter where you are, makes the space. And just, I think it's even more important with COVID, when you couldn't get together, then, just that we're now, able to be together and just, what a special thing that is. And, you sort of, you can feel that, oh, my davening is better at home, but it's, the idea of just being together with 9 other people that just makes your davening, more powerful.
And I think it's important to note, and there's a reason for that, and of that which you're saying, Hilton, and that is that according to our tradition, when God created the world, there were sparks that were scattered all across the world. So if we just sanctified the space and not every space, then we wouldn't be able to gather the sparks. And part of our job is to gather those sparks that were lost at the time of creation. We've spoken about this in other classes. And so when you're making that minyan, or you're praying wherever you're praying in your home, and even right now, since we're on Zoom, we're all bringing this study and this spiritual moment into our homes. This is refining the spark that perhaps has been waiting for thousands of years since the world was created. And we all are able to simultaneously, through technology, refine all the different sparks, the spark that's in my physical location that I am in now, and the sparks that's in each one of our physical locations. So it's a beautiful thing. And I think that something that we should celebrate as well, just in this moment that we're in right now, that we're all in different cities, in different places, and we're able to do this. So thank you. Jen.
One question I've always had is, if this is the first month that was counted, why do we celebrate the new year in a different month? Is it because this is just Nisan is just the first month that was created, but it's not well, I think you know what I'm saying, but I'm starting to go in circles in my
it's a really good question, and I would love at some point to talk about. I know I always, when these questions come up, I'm like, okay, we have another deep dive that we have to do. I'd love to do a deep dive on the Jewish calendar, which is fascinating. But just to give you the 30-second or less answer, Nisan is the beginning of the year, whereas Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the months. So, okay, I need a little more than 30 seconds. Some calendars are solar, especially the calendar that most of us go by is the Gregorian calendar that was started by Aloysius Gregorius. That's why it's called the Gregorian calendar. It's completely solar, which is comprised of 365 and a quarter days. There's no year, there's no months, there's no weeks. The lunar calendar is of 12 equal months, 354 days. I saved you the math, but there's no days. It's just 12 equal months. The Jewish calendar is comprised of both solar and lunar. It's really a lunar calendar, which is why Rosh Hashanah is in the beginning of the lunar calendar. It's mostly a lunar calendar, but we have an issue. The Torah says that we need to keep Passover in the spring and Sukkot in the harvest. And you know, we just started Ramadan, or those who celebrate just started Ramadan. Ramadan can kind of, because the lunar calendar does not go by season, it could be any point in any season, and every year it kind of changes as to when it begins. So if we only went by the lunar calendar, we would end up getting caught in an issue when it came to Passover and Sukkot being in those seasons. So being that we have to keep the seasons for those two holidays, we have what we have. We're the only ones who have a both lunar and solar calendar combined. The 12 equal months adding up to 354 days, which is 11 days short, 11 and a quarter days short of a lunar cycle, which is why 7 times in 19 years in the Jewish calendar, we have a leap year, which we add a month, which if you figure out the math, it actually adds the extra 11 days. So that's why this year, actually, in the Jewish calendar, we just finished the second Adar, which would have been a leap year. And that's how we are able to keep on equaling up. And that's why sometimes you have Passover being later in the year or earlier in the year, because we're always trying to make sure that we even it up to have those holidays in the right time. That was a little more than 30 seconds and a lot more complicated than I'm saying it, but that was my, in a nutshell, answer. Okay. And there's a lot more to it also of why Rosh Hashanah is where it is, which is a beautiful story all on its own. Fami. No, Fami? No? Okay. Alana. Oh, Fami.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
She can. Okay. So if we see how the universe is running, everything is precise. Everything. So what you said about the 3 things to take your life, and you said it's a talk another day. I think it is, because like if God gives you 3 reasons, it should stay 3 reasons. You cannot add to it, and you cannot subtract to it. So if he said like a 3, then you cannot add that, okay, if you die, you have 3 the version, or if you don't do this, it's okay. So we must be precise. I mean, if it is 3, no innovation. 3 is 3.
That's right. And I think that's a very important point. Thank you.
We do not, I mean, innovation or subtractions, it's very bad.
We have to stay focused on what it is, and that's why we have these kind of very specific elements of it, and not anything else, right? I mean, there's a lot of jokes about, the priest that stuck the gun to the rabbi's head, so he eats bacon. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that. Yes, Ilana.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused.
Sure.
So I don't really know where in the Torah it talks about the afterlife, but I'm looking forward to finding that whole piece. So I'm just a bit confused because I think a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Messianic era and that it's one of the 13 principles of faith to believe in the Messianic era, and yet we're not really focused on the afterlife. So I can't kind of reconcile the two together. If it's a principle of faith, then why aren't we focused on the afterlife? Do you know what I'm saying?
So I'm happy that Fami's question was right before yours, that you let him go before you, because what Fami said, I think, really answers your question to a certain extent, and that is there's absolutes. Absolute is not faith. Faith is where the non-absolutes come in, which means a lot of Judaism is about knowledge, most of it. If somebody said that Judaism was about blind faith, you can laugh at them. Judaism is about 0.5% faith and 99.5% knowledge. But we do have a couple of elements. For example, Maimonides gives 13 principles of faith. How many principles do you think there are in Judaism? Thousands. But just 13 that are faith-based. So faith are those things that we could, that we purposely don't explain. Because they're faith, and that's the difference. Everything else needs to be understood, needs to be pieced apart, needs to be explained. Those elements of faith are purposely those things that we don't explain. That's the difference. Does that clarify? Okay. These are great questions. Thank you. This is amazing. Okay, well, I want to go into one other little piece here. I hope I can get through it in the next 10 minutes. Yeah. So it seems that the mind is always on one excursion or another, either back into the past or forward in the future. And the last place that the mind wants to settle is right here and right now. Worry, anxiety, regret, guilt. These are some of the more pronounced emotions that are found within the human psyche. And evidently, those who worry about what will be think too much about the future, while those who suffer from regret, from resentment, are paralyzed by the past. Whenever our minds are turned towards the past or towards the future, we lose our connection to the time in which life is truly unfolding, the now. So the idea that God gave us the ability to sanctify time is even a higher step. That it's about being mindful. It's about spending our lives in the here and now. That life is best served when it's lived in the present moment. And overall, where we're in the past, or even in a past life, or who we're going to be in a future life, is not as relevant to us as this very instant. And what will occur in the future afterlife may not be at least for some people, of great value to their understanding of the life that they're leading today. So when our lives are meaningful in the present, we don't have to look at the future or back in the past for the validation or for the confirmation. There was a great Talmudic sage. His name was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And we just recently in our Talmud class studied this, that he was laying in his deathbed and he began to weep bitter tears. And he said that in the afterlife, there are two paths upon which my soul can journey. One path leads to heaven and the other one to hell. And I don't know which of these two paths I will be guided, is what he says. This poignant existential doubt, this doubt punctuating the end of a saintly life, I think is a mark of profound humility. Because still, what's interesting in this anecdote is that this noble sage never found this existential dilemma of any importance, of any priority in his life until he was on his deathbed. He asked the question on his deathbed. He didn't ask the question when he was 35. And while in the mindset of living a meaningful life, dedicated to learning, dedicated to teaching, dedicated to perpetuating goodness, he didn't give the afterlife any thought. He had no desire to be absent from the present by peering into the future and getting lost there. There's a very beautiful story as well about the Baal Shem Tov. He says, the story goes that it was a day before Passover, and a woman who was having difficulty conceiving a child came to visit the holy and saintly Baal Shem Tov and brought him many of the necessary provisions for the holiday. Being in a joyous and heightened mood, the Baal Shem Tov offered her a blessing to give birth to a healthy child that very year. And since the woman was genetically unable to bear children, it was decreed that although the blessing would be fulfilled, the Baal Shem Tov would lose his share in the world to come for having troubled the heaven, as it were, in this manner. And when the Baal Shem Tov got wind of this decree, he became quite joyous. He said, now he'd be able to serve his creator with a complete heart, without any ulterior motive or thoughts for future compensation or reward. So he was happy that he lost his share in the world to come. I know you have a lot of questions about this story. What I would say about this story is that what it tells is exactly what we're saying. That the point of being in this world is to be here. And the more focused and the more mindful that we can be in this world, the better people we're going to be. And that we shouldn't spend our time or even our thought, even though I'm here teaching all this to you, we still shouldn't be focused and spending our time worried about the past or the future, but really spending our time worried and focused on the present. Did I cut out at some point? Which part did I cut out for? Oh no, I
When you
didn't
first
know.
started
So-
talking about the first sage that you spoke about, you cut out a bit there.
Oh,
That
so
story.
The rabbi's name and whatever came after that.
okay, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was his name, and it was the Talmud that we were studying not long ago in Brachot, where he was lying on his deathbed, and he was focused on whether he was going to go to heaven or hell. And what I was saying is that it only worried him and bothered him on his deathbed and not during his life. He wasn't thinking about it during his life, and that is the right process. Sorry about that. I didn't see that the internet connection wasn't good. So what are we taking out of today?
So actually, that last little bit that you just said about the rabbi on his deathbed, I find that so important because, you know, although we're talking about the afterlife, whatever, it just highlights the point that it's really not so important. You know, you only focus on it kind of at the moment of your death, and it's not something that you kind of focus on in your life. You have to focus on being here and present and living your life and doing good. And I don't know, I find it so that last little piece kind of brought it together for me.
Okay, well, thank you, Alana.
Yeah.
Cheryl, what about you?
I think it's easier to say than do because I've tried to be in a meditative mode when I'm positioned to do so. And the racing thoughts of the past and the present I just can't shut it down. Sometimes I can't shut it down even at night. So that's a problem. So I hear what you're saying. It's just harder to do. But the other takeaway for me was I didn't know there was a beginning of the months and beginning of the year. And I found that confusing and interesting, but I understood it because certain holidays needed to fall in certain seasons, but I never really knew any of that. So that was all new to me. That's my takeaway.
Okay, amazing. Look at that. Random question becomes your takeaway. Love it.
Yep.
Jill?
You said just a little while ago, absolutes are not faith. And it's just, I feel like that's something I have been working on for years. I didn't have that concise of a word, but I like that absolutes are not faith. And as you talk about Judaism, it's like there's this you know, there's all these conversations and arguing, and I like that. I'm gonna ponder that.
Amazing. Wow. Kelsey, you haven't spoken in so long. We missed you.
Oh, thank you. I missed everyone. I was just taking it all in. I've been trying to work really hard on just really being more present in life. And so I think just the concept of that's actually sanctifying life is really profound. So I really like that. And it really helps things just fall into place better and more easily.
Beautiful. And Jen, welcome back. So exciting to have you back.
Thank you. It's very exciting to be back. I just love how everything ties together. I have like a personal ritual of lighting a candle for the new moon and setting an affirmation. And the affirmation for this month is about leaving my past behind me and just this idea of time. So I just love that this is all coming together at the same time.
That's amazing. Celeste?
Really excellent class. Thank you so much. I think what sunk in the most was that we are here not to sanctify space, but to sanctify the moment. It's really beautiful, and I like how it ties in with our Kabbalah of mindfulness class. So thanks very much.
And Fami?
This ties with the more you focus on the afterlife, the more you won't focus on your mission on this life. So, and we have a mission here to complete. So it's better to be in this time. And the Torah is actually it's actually our light. You know, it tells you don't do this because you have to focus on what you have to do. So this is how I see it, Rabbi.
Thank you. And Hilton, welcome. This is Talmud coming to the pre-class. This is the pre-Talmud.
Yes, I mean, just sort of two thoughts that came. you know, in the Ma'ariv, I think we say about Torah, ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu.
Mhm.
I mean, that it's just like, you know, we don't even, I think we kind of often, or the modern world, you sort of see it as like a burden. But I mean, sorry, just to, I don't know how to translate it, because it's ki hem chayenu, because it's your life and what the length of your days. I mean, is the way that
Yes.
whatever that the Siduri talks about Torah. And then sort of just something, I mean, we're talking about life, you know, that right at the end of the Torah, that it talks about, what's it that God says, or Moses says, you know, I place before you life and death, and this and that. And then the Torah still gives you the answer. It still says, choose life. You know, it actually tells, it's like giving you a multiple choice and then telling you what the answer is, you know, and yeah, I suppose, and just to transition into the, you know, we say it each week in the Talmud that, you know, you sit with the plate of food in front of you and you sort of have to have the mindfulness, you know, that this is from God, and, you know, that we can just be grateful for the miracles of well, the plants growing and everyone working together to actually get the food to our plates.
It's very beautiful. It's so true. And that idea of choose life, because it really is a choice. The Torah is not taking away the choice from us. The Torah is just saying you have the choice, but we'd like you to make the right choice. It's very beautiful. It's a great way to end. Thank you, everyone. This is really special. I'm going to try, I'm not promising, I'll let you know closer to next week. I'm going to try to be here next week, but it is the day before Passover. I may not be physically possible. But if it is, so we'll keep next week's class open-ended for now, with the hope that it's going to happen, but it may not. So if I don't see you, have a very happy and healthy Passover, and a lot of joy to everyone. And if anything that you need leading up to Passover, I'm happy to be here to be able to support that. And this is wonderful. To be continued.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.